But if preservation is not to be found in a single manuscript tradition with no variants, how then has the text been preserved? It has been preserved through the very mechanism that produced the majority of the textual variants, the rapid, uncontrolled, widespread explosion of manuscripts during the early centuries of the Christian era. There was never a time when any one man or group of men had control over the text of the New Testament. There was never a Christian Uthman. All assertions regarding adding doctrines, changing theology, removing teachings, etc. are without merit. The Christian church was a persecuted minority without power to enforce a uniform textual transmission, as in Islam. The relatively small amount of meaningful variation is a small price to pay to avoid the impossible position of having to defend an edited, controlled text that can make no claim to representing the original. I believe the evangelistic command of Christ contained in the Gospels was taken seriously by the church. Hence, the church wanted the message of Christ to go out into all the world and quickly. The result was that the scriptures that the church treasured would likewise be distributed far and wide, not in a controlled fashion. The idea of paralleling the Christian scriptures with, say, the 10th century Masoretes, who were not in any way trying to distribute their scriptures all around the world, is utterly fallacious. The method of preservation would have to match the purpose of the early church. And the idea of having a controlled, non-distributed, nigh unto photocopied text flies in the face of the reality of the early church.
You know, the copy they found at the Dead Sea Scrolls of Jeremiah was 15% shorter than the Jeremiah we have. 15% shorter. So there were a lot of changes being made by Jewish scribes. And what that shows us, in fact, is that Jewish scribes in the Middle Ages were quite meticulous with their copying. Would that the Christian scribes were. If you compare two Christian copies from the same time period, say 1,000 years separate, so you take a 3rd century copy of the New Testament with a 13th century copy of the New Testament, you don't have anything like that amount of agreement. There are massive differences.
A couple of things. The Old Testament transmission is not like the New Testament transmission. It's much more controlled because it was within just the people of Israel. The Old Testament transmission is not like the New Testament transmission. It's much more controlled because it was within just the people of Israel.
We have to have consistency in the standards. See, what I've been doing now for a number of years in debating Islamic leaders is looking for the consistent Muslim. The Muslim that will use the same standards for the Quran as they use for the New Testament. And so far, I have not found that person, but I'm going to keep searching and keep doing these debates until I find that person. Thank you very much.